All right, do stay with me while we also tell our viewers why this deal is being called the mother of all deals, why it's so significant. It's because a lot of the statistics that we're about to bring to you on this deal that is taking place, of course, just kind of wrapping it all up at Hyderabad House. But what is it that India wants? Zero duty access for textiles, of course, being one of them. Leather, handlooms, processed foods. That's what India is looking at, zero duty access for these four. Meanwhile, let's also just tell you what the European Union wants market access to. It wants market access to automobiles, to wines and spirits, to high-tech manufacturing. So that's where the understanding is at right now. Let's also tell you about the trade weightage between the European Union and India. When it comes to the European Union, it's 9% of EU's global exports. Bilateral trade between 2024 and 2025 in US dollars stands at 136.53 billion. India exports stand at 75.85 billion. India imports stand at about 60.68 billion US dollars. Services trade in the year 2024 stands at 83.10 billion US dollars. Those are the big numbers that we are bringing to you. But like I said, Aditya's there. He's tracking all the developments and it's seeking alternatives, which is really the big story right now. Because Aditya, this comes at a time, like we have been saying, that the global order has been unpredictable. And now you have this big deal coming up. Aditya is not with us right now. We'll try and reconnect with him. To the right of your screens again, viewers, you see those three confident leaders representing India and the EU. That's more of a victory sign in a way. The ease with which you see the three of them holding hands. On screen, you have the three leaders who are the defining people in terms of this big mother of all deals trade. To the left, you have them inside the Hyderabad House, where talks have begun, delegation level talks. Narendra Modi hosting the 16th European Union India Summit in the national capital with President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and visiting President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. And they will be very soon announcing the details of that very big historic trade deal. Let's just listen in to what Ursula, the President of the European Commission, had said earlier when she was talking about this impending deal with India.
Right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first mover advantage for Europe with one of the world's fastest growing and most dynamic continents.
Aditya Raj Kaul is back with us. He joins us live from Hyderabad House, where that all-important deal is about to be signed in some time from now. Aditya, let's talk about the timeline as well. Like we said initially, more than 2 decades to get to this point. But what next? When will these trade deal nuances be implemented also is the big question when you look forward after we hear more about the FTA.
Well, yes, certainly there is a lot of symbolism and strategic consequence when it comes to the historic trade deal between India and European Union that has been under works for a lot of time. Of course, the strategic partner since 2004, the relationship has been rooted in shared democratic values, multilateralism, and commitment to the rules-based international order that has been certainly under question when it comes to the entire situation and global geopolitics situation over the last few years. Now, the ties between India and European Union stretch back to 1962, when India became one of the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with the European Economic Community, which was a precursor to the EU. But significantly over the last few years, ever since a lot of talk on the geo-economic situation globally when it comes to the Trump administration's global tariff policy as well, there have been a lot of moves that we have seen globally. The global economy has been navigating the renewed turbulence. And of course, we've seen a lot of moves by New Delhi in this direction, which has signed close to 7 FTAs in the last 1.5 years alone. So when it comes to India-EU partnership, EU is India's largest trading partner in goods, with a bilateral trade which had touched USD 136 billion in 2004-25, and steadily has been growing in the services trade as well. Over the past decade, we have significantly seen the European companies expanding their footprint in India's manufacturing, clean energy and digital sectors, while the Indian firms in IT services to pharmaceuticals have depended their presence across Europe. So clearly we've seen a boost in the trade and commerce in different sectors in the last many years. And now with the inking of this agreement, the trade will significantly shift positively. There will be not turbulence, but in fact, reduction of barriers between India and the European Union, and the scale of the FTA will also increase. The negotiations, in fact, as I said, have taken 2 decades. There was a brief hiatus, but they resumed in 2021 when the leaders set an ambitious goal to conclude this in 2025. And now we are standing in the January of 2026 with finally the engagements concluding positively for both EU and India. And in the next couple of hours, we'll see the signing of the agreement and the leadership of India and EU coming together to sign this agreement that will economically, politically and geopolitically bring EU and India closer.
All right. The question I have for you next is, should we see this as a formal negotiation round, Aditya, or is this the final political push to that big deal?
Well, there is a significant message that is associated with this trade deal as well. Of course, EU and India work very closely, work very silently through global turbulence. As I said, there was Russia-Ukraine war, there was Israel-Gaza-Hamas conflict that led to a lot of disturbance in the connectivity, in supply chains, and of course, especially when it comes to sea routes, there was a lot of difficulty that was faced as well, especially in the Middle East. When it comes to trade, commerce and connectivity, India had worked on the India-Middle East-Europe trade, commerce and the trade connectivity project as well in 2023 when India hosted the G20. But that led to hiatus and a brief blockage in that because of the wars that were underway. But now, with a significant push towards trade and commerce, towards the FTA between India and EU, I think it's a loud message to the global community that even through turbulence, when you have the positive mindset, when you are trying to link people closer and reduce the trade barriers, certainly there can be way forward, there can be mutual interest, there can be shared interests that people can work towards. And that's what India and EU leadership have proven through global turbulence. And there would be a ripple effect of that in a positive way for other countries also who will be pushed towards doing positive trade and FTAs with India. There have been several FTAs that are under negotiation. As I said, immediately after India and EU, there would be formal signing of the trade agreement between India and New Zealand. We saw Oman and India coming together on an FTA also. And now, next month, we'll see the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, also visiting India and perhaps beginning and resuming talks on trade, the CEPA agreement between India and Canada. So, India headed in a positive direction. There is, of course, the long-pending trade negotiations that are underway between Washington, D.C. and New Delhi as well. And even as we speak right now, there is a summit-level delegation talks that are underway in India's iconic Hyderabad house in New Delhi, where EU leadership is meeting Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The nitty-gritties and the fine-tuning of the agreement has already been done. It's just a formality that the signing of the agreement will happen in the next 1 hour. And then perhaps around 1 p.m., we'll see both the leaderships of EU and India coming together, speaking in detail on the positive trajectory that the relationship is going towards and what the trade deal and the FTA between India and EU means for the global community and especially for India and EU.
Aditya, what's the one outcome India has been pushing for the hardest in, this long negotiation process between the European Union and India that has summed up what we're seeing on our screens today? What has been that one outcome that India has really pushed for, according to your sources?
Well, firstly, I've been speaking to a lot of diplomats and EU envoys in India who describe this deal as balanced and forward-looking, one which would lower the tariffs significantly. It will also ease regulatory barriers and open services markets and strengthen supply chain resilience. So that is a very important, significant aspect of this entire development at this particular stage. For India, if you ask me, it promises greater access to 450 million strong consumer market. For Europe, it offers a deeper anchor in one of the world's fastest growing major economies. So from overall perspective, I think it's a win-win situation for both India and EU. when it comes to deeper trade and commerce, for connectivity and access to a large market for the European Union and India both ways. So this is a positive trajectory for both. The EU leadership has been waiting for this to happen for a long time. As I said, there were hectic negotiations that were underway, but the FTA, which is the economic pillar of a much broader strategic convergence, has finally happened between India and EU. The Trade Technology Council had also met in 22. And of course, when it comes to trade, when it comes to science and technology, when it of course comes to AI and defense and the strategic partnership, there will be a significant boost that will happen on this trade deal.
Also, any issues that are proving to be sensitive or unresolved for the time being? We know that big deal is going to be announced, but any roadblocks that you heard of on the way, along the way to get to the point that they have in the last couple of weeks or months?
Well, yes, there were significant roadblocks that happened in this, of course, because of global issues and then internal dynamics as well. Of course, both India and EU would have sought the best interest for their own people, for their own economies, and for their own national interests. But when it comes to India, the top agenda for India is the strategic autonomy that India has been pressing on over the last 4 years. That's saying that each and every economic policy, each and every policy will be for the benefit of the Indian consumer, for the Indian masses, and that will be the top priority for the Indian government when it comes to Ministry of External Affairs or the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So that was the top priority when these discussions and negotiations were underway. And finally, the crystallization of the deal has finally happened. As I said, the diplomats have dubbed this as a balanced and forward-looking issue that will ease regulatory barriers. And of course, tariffs will be significantly reduced as well. A lot of roadblocks in the past, but those roadblocks are in the past. And now a positive trajectory between India and EU. The summit-level delegation talks have begun. And in next 45 minutes or so, we'll see the signing of this agreement and then the top leadership of this country coming out and speaking in detail of what this means for India and EU and what this means for the global community that is seeing a significant, problems and economic barriers over the last 1 year or so.
All right, so the top focus will be on trade, defense, security, climate change, many issues to be discussed there. I'm coming back to you in exactly a minute from now, Aditya. Don't go away, because we also want to tell our viewers more about this relationship between the EU and India. So what are India's top exports to the European Union? We're talking about the year 2025, and of course, we're talking in billions of US dollars here. Let's talk about those products. First, it's petroleum products, that is about 15 USD billion. Then you talk about electronics. Smartphones play a huge role here, 4.3 billion USD is what we're talking about. You have textiles and garments, organic chemicals, machinery and computers, iron and steel. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top factors really when it comes to what are the top goods that India exports to the EU at this point. Important to note, because a lot of this also has to do with what the talks are really about inside. Then you have pharma, you have gems and jewelry, you have auto components, footwear and coffee. The other 6 that are important at this point, or rather 5 there that we are talking about, these are the important components when it comes to those talks and the deal that is being signed between the two parties, the European Union and India. Now let's talk about India's imports from the EU as well. Again, we're talking about the year 2025. What are the top goods that are imported from the EU? Again, in US billion dollars that we're talking about. Machinery and computers, electronics, aircraft. You have medical and scientific equipment, gems and jewelry, organic chemicals, plastics. So again, you have top 7 that are mentioned here. In the gems and jewelry, you have rough diamonds, as well as in electronics, you have mobile parts. Important to note that these are the important components that are also imported from the EU, and these are the top goods that we are talking about.